must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? How many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
That song had a huge impact on me and many other people around the world. Sadly, we're still asking those same questions. How many times? How many years? How many roads? We are a people of questions and of protest. Abraham protested when God was about to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Was it fair, he asked? Moses protested that Pharaoh's laws were unjust. And we protested against Moses many times when we felt that his promise, God's promise, was unfulfilled. We have stood up to rulers and tyrants in every nation that we've inhabited, much to our peril. And so it was natural that in the 20th century, we added our voices strongly to the music of protest. These were the songs that moved me as a young man, and so it's fitting that for today's backyard concert, that I welcome an old friend. David Budin is a singer, songwriter, and journalist who has written extensively for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and has been editor of Cleveland Magazine and Northern Ohio Live. He is a founding member of the folk group Long Road, whose motto is making old songs new and new songs sound old. That's David. A native Clevelander, David moved to New York at the age of 18 and within a year was producing multiple artists for Sire Records and others. He also is the person who booked me into the Cafe Wah and other folk clubs around the village back in the day. And so, welcome, David.
Hello. And if you recall, when I booked you in the Cafe Wah, you were opening for Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. Do you remember that?
I remember it very well. And why were they playing at a little club in Greenwich Village? I can't figure that out.
Well, everybody played there. Everybody wanted to play there. Rock and folk and jazz.
Who are some of the people that played at Cafe Wah?
Well, I think most notably Love and Spoonful, before they became a big hit singles rock band. They never really were a rock band. They were mostly folk, and they were one of the 5 or 6 innovators of folk rock, because they were all folkies, and then they just plugged in, which happened a few times and started a whole movement.
And they weren't Jewish, but let's say they were.
Well, one of them was, Zal Yanofsky was.
Oh.
The lead guitarist. So there's Jews everywhere. The place is crawling with them.
So, all right. So what was it about Jewish culture and Jewish life that drew people to the folk scene back in the 60s, and in particular, protest music? Why protest music?
Well, I think what the connection between the fans and also the singer-songwriters who created the music was, I was thinking about this the other day, and I was wondering that myself. And it occurred to me that in the third wave of Jewish immigration, from about 1880 to 1924, which when they actually cut off immigration of Jews from Eastern Europe, all those people, well, I mean, not all of them, I can't speak for all of them, but a great many of them had socialistic and communistic tendencies just because of the way they had been treated and the way their lives had been. And they had this feeling of they really wanted equality and fairness and justice and freedom. And it then occurred to me that those people were our grandfathers, our generation's grandparents.
Yeah, literally, my grandfather had to leave Lithuania because he was a socialist, and the Tsar didn't take kindly to socialists.
Right. And that's, I mean, like a great many of them were a big percentage. And so those, I think those sensibilities just came through the generations. And, then there was our parents' generation, and then the folk boom, the baby boomers, and Bob Dylan, Phil Oakes, even Paul Simon at the beginning of his career, Songs of Silence and other songs on Simon and Garfunkel's first album. You could consider them protest songs. Right. And a few others. I mentioned Dylan and Phil Oakes because, number one, they were Jewish. They were, from Jewish families. Number two, they were two of the three most prolific protest songwriters of that era. Tom Paxton also, but he wasn't a Jew, so we don't care about him.
Not today. Right. So who were some of Dylan's influences?
Well, he really got into traditional folk music, and especially Woody Guthrie. Woody Guthrie was his number one major influence. Dylan came to New York to visit Woody Guthrie when he was sick in the hospital, sick and dying. And he really wanted to be Woody Guthrie.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Woody Guthrie, because somehow Woody Guthrie also wrote Jewish songs. I think he has a Hanukkah album out.
Well,
right?
He married a Jewish woman, and his son is Arlo Guthrie. Arlo had a bar mitzvah, and so there was he had connections. He knew people.
Great. Well, should we start with a Woody Guthrie tune?
Yes, Woody Guthrie came of age during the Depression, and also he was from Oklahoma, so it was the Dust Bowl as well. So double whammy on those people. And so they all got out, anyone who could. And he was a poet, really, and he often borrowed melodies, which was the folk tradition. That was not like stealing in those days. It's stealing now because lawyers are involved. But back then, you took a melody and you wrote a song to it. The song I'm going to do, I think he wrote the melody. The way it's done now, there are many more chords added to it. Not many more, a few more. He played a lot of songs with one chord, basically. But anyway, he wrote literally thousands of songs, thousands of poems, and then many of them set to music. And he wrote, because of where he came from and what he went through, he wrote a lot about, there were protest songs. They weren't actually, many of them weren't about criticizing the government, but they were criticizing inequality in general. Even his most famous song, "This Land Is Your Land," has a couple of verses at the end that you never hear about that thing exactly. About inequality.
I would never have thought of "This Land Is Your Land" as a protest song.
Right. I encourage everyone to just look up all of the lyrics to that song and see what he was really talking about.
Great. We'll give out your phone number at the end of this.
Yes, it's and operators are standing by. Actually, we're sitting by.
So what's the tune, David? So
this one is called "Pastures of Plenty," and it's about the migrant workers, farm workers, and they had a tough life and not paid well, not treated well. And anyway, that's what this one is about. So
let's hear it.
Like this. It's a mighty hard road that these poor hands have hoed. My poor feet have traveled a hot, dusty road. Out of your dust bowls and westward we rode. Your deserts were hot and your mountains were cold. I've wandered all over this green growing land. Wherever your crops were, I've lent you my hands. On the edge of your city, you'll see me, and then I come with the dust and I go with the wind. California, Arizona, I've worked all your crops. Then it's north up to Oregon to gather your hops. Dig the beets from your ground, cut the grapes from your vines, to set on your table that light sparkling wine. Green pastures of plenty from dry desert ground, from the Grand Coulee Dam where the waters run down. Every state in the Union this migrant has been. I come with the dust and I go with the wind. Well, it's always we ramble this river and I, all along your green valley. I'll work till I die, and I'll travel this road until death sets me free. My pastures of plenty must always be green. It's a mighty hard road that these poor hands have hoed. My poor feet have traveled a hot, dusty road. Out of your dust bowls and westward we rode. Your deserts were hot and your mountains were cold. On the edge of your city you'll see me, and then I come with the dust and I go with the wind.
Powerful tune, and you can see where Dylan gets blowing in the wind. I assume this is written prior to Dylan.
Right, yeah, these were from the 40s, 50s, well, 30s, 40s, 50s.
Great.
I'm
dying to get into sort of the next phase, which is Phil Oakes, and we'll do that in a minute. But we're going to take a little pause here and invite our next guest to join us. He's going to tell us about protest songs that happened well before the 1960s. And those songs weren't only about racial equality. They were about justice and fairness for all people. And in some cases, specifically about our predicament living in Europe and other places. So to give us a taste of this, I've invited my dear friend and colleague, and he's one of the funniest people of all time, Cantor Herschel Fox. Was machst du?
Ich mach fein, ich hoffe, du bist gesund. Und ich will dir sagen, dass Punkt, wenn wir um der Leben, das halte die Geule, also ich will leben, die Geule schlimmer, wie mehr wie Amen, Amen wie Amen. That's one of Johnny Cash's favorite sayings. You know that. You know that.
Thank you, Herschel.
You can also call me by my first name, because please.
Thank you. May I call you Herschel?
Herschel, that's what I was called when I was little, you know.
Yeah, right.
And they say Chazonim never grow up. That's why they're Chazonim.
So you were born not in the United States. So when we talk about protest songs, we usually think like a work shirt, a guitar, right, a hat. And you come from a different place and a different tradition, and yet protest is a very strong part of the culture you grew up in as well.
You're so right. You know, my parents escaped from Hitler. During the war years in Russia. I was born there at the end of the war. A few days later, we went back to Poland. And then I grew up in Winnipeg, Canada, where they emigrated. And it was wonderful because I grew up with Yiddish and Yiddish songs, and so many of the early Yiddish songs, like you said, we think of protest more in the 60s only, but so many of the Yiddish songs of all kinds had to do with protests. The best examples, my favorite, were that a kid who doesn't want to study Torah, and the father complaining to us, what's wrong with you, Motl? The rabbi's complaining. And he says, no, it's not my fault. He protests, it's the rabbi's fault. He doesn't tell you that he aggravates all of us and he's mean to me. So that was one of the type of protest songs we had.
Well, how does that go? Can you sing a little of that?
The rabbi says, the father says to the son, du bist noch Hellier von früher geworden. You're even worse than you used to be. Der hat sich ein vertraut auf mir, als du der Geist in seine Jahren. You don't let the rabbi teach. And then the kid says, nicht Tate, was der Rebbe sagt. The rabbi is not really telling the truth. A schlechter Mensch, he's a horrible person. Sie nicht da sein gleich. Was erzählt nicht, wenn mich schlägt? Why doesn't he tell you when he hits me? Zertaten you, and the kid shows him the backside. Them bloy and seichen, look at the mark I have. So that was, those were the first things I heard were with kids protesting to their parents and protesting the kids, the parents protesting to the kids that they're not studying.
So there's actually kind of a universal rejection of authority in a way. I mean, look what we did to Moses. We made his life miserable.
If I could talk like you, I would be from Cleveland. So, very, very well. I really didn't know you're so funny until today.
So give me another example, Herschel.
One more. I was just thinking of that when you said it. And then there were wonderful, like between mother and daughter, Yiddish folk songs, like Yomme, Yomme, spiel mir a Lieder, levostos meid, levil Yomme, musician by the name of Yomme, play me a little song, sing me a little song. What does my daughter want? And then she says that because the singer says to her, Dos meid levil, a kleid lehob. The mother says, the little girl wants a dress. Darf man gehen dem Schneider sorgen? So we got to tell it to the tailor. But the girl says, "Nay, Mama, nay." She protests, "No, you're wrong. Ich will, that's not what I want. Du kennst mich nicht verstehen." And then they go through various tradesmen, like the shoester, the shoemaker, and guess what she really wants? And the answer is, "Das Mädel will a Chosen haben."
Ah, a husband.
Because she's a teenager. She's an old maid already, 17 years old, right? And so, darf man gehen dem Schatten sorgen. So we got to look for the matchmaker. And what does the girl say? Jo, Mama, jo. Yeah, du kennst mich schön verstehen. You understand me. Du weißt schön, was ich meine. You know what I mean? And
beautiful.
They don't say she married the guy, but, you know.
So interesting to think about protest within the culture, within the family, with the rabbi, the school, and so forth. So how does it then get to like the Song of the Partisans?
A little bit before that, some of the early chalutzim, for example, began to sing songs about Israel, protesting to the world, it was then called even Palestine, that we should have a Jewish country. And that was their protest to the world. We need a Jewish country. Now, sang songs like, Techzak, lo yedei kol acheinu amechonim, afrot artseinu, ba'asheru sham. And they say, Al yipol ruchachem, don't let your spirit go down. Al yizim etronim, bo ushchem echad, come with one shoulder, le'ezerat ha'am, to help the people build a country.
Right, so many songs of the Chalutzim, and in a sense, the songs were reflecting the emotion and in a way of uniting people around something from the arts, something lyrical. Very,
very true, especially several of the early songs like Rad Halayla, Rav Shireinu, our song is full of hope to build a new country, and many. Zemer, Zemerlach, Zemer, Zemerlach. You know, I didn't know I'm going to speak with you like this.
I'm loving it. So then the Holocaust happens.
what happened, I was very lucky to have as several teachers when I was growing up in Winnipeg who were survivors. And one of them, Leon Berger, actually knew Herschel, the writer of Zognish Kamel. And he was a young, very sensitive, wonderful man, apparently. That's what he told us, Mr. Berger, his students. And he said, to me, these are the most magnificent words of protest I think ever written. I'll do just the first and the last paragraph in English, and then I'll do it in Yiddish, the whole song. Never say that, he wrote it in the Vilna Ghetto, that these last...
What year?
Like, I would say about 43. I might be 1 year off, either way. He says, never say you are going on your final road, even though it looks bad, right? Although leaden skies block out blue days, our longed for hour, he means of freedom, will yet come. Our step will beat out mir seinen do. We are here. And the last one, this song of protest is written with our blood, not with lead. It is not a song of a free bird flying overhead. Amid crumbling walls, a people sang this song with grenades in their hands.
Wow. Let's hear it, Herschel.
Sag nicht keinmal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg, wenn Himmeln bleien verstellen blaue Tag. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Stadt, es wird abbeugt an unser Trott, wir seinen dort. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Stadt, es wird abbeugt an unser Trott, wir seien dort. Von grünem Palmenland bis weißem Land von Schnee. Wir kommen an mit unser Pein, mit unser Weh. Und wo gefallen, sie ist ein Spritz von unser Blut. Sprotzen wird dort unser Gewurre, unser Mut. Und wo gefallen, sie ist ein Spritz von unser Blut. Sprotzen wird dort unser Gewurre, unser Mut. So wird die Morgensonne begilden uns dem Heint. Und unsere Nächten wird verschwinden mit dem Feind. Und euch versammeln wird die Sonne in dem Kajor. Ja, Parol soll gehen das Lied von dort zu dort. Und euch versammeln wird die Sonne in dem Kajor. Ja, Parol soll gehen das Lied von dort zu dort. Das Lied geschrieben ist mit Blut und nicht mit Blei. Es ist nicht kein Lied von einem Vogel auf der Frei. Das hat das Volk zwischen faundige Wend. Das Lied gesungen mit Naganes in der Hand. Das hat das Volk zwischen faundige Wend. Das Lied gesungen mit Naganes in der Hand. Da sag dich keinmal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg, wenn Himmeln bleiene verstellen blaue Tag. Weil kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Schau. Es wird abbeugt an unser Trott, wir seinen da. Weil kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Schau. Es wird abbeugt an unser Trott, wir seinen da.
Oh, amazing, amazing. So powerful, Herschel. Thank you for that performance. And I wonder, and we're going to go back to my friend David now. Thank you for being with us. And that added so much to our story. And I wonder how we went from, in 20 years, from 45 to 65, from holding a grenade in our hand to try to fight oppression, to saying, we ain't a marching anymore. to protesting against war. I wonder how all of that happened. So we're going to go back to David Budin now. Thank you, Herschel.
Thank you.
This one I'm going to do, I think it was probably 1964, 65, an early song, but it is it has been so effective that people still do it now. I mean, it's still being recorded now by young groups because it's so kind of universal in its themes. And
let's hear it.
Sing along. Oh, I marched to the Battle of New Orleans at the end of the early British War. The young land started growing, the young blood started flowing, but I ain't a-marching anymore. I killed my share of Indians in 1,000 different fights. I was there at the Little Big Horn. I heard many men a-lying, I saw many more dying, but I ain't a-marching anymore. It's always the old to lead us to the war, always the young to fall. Now look at all we've won with a saber and a gun. Tell me, was it worth it all? And I stole California from the Mexican lands. I fought in the bloody British War. Yes, I even killed my brothers and so many others, but I ain't a-marching anymore. I marched to the battles of the German trench in a war that was bound to end all wars. I must have killed 1,000,000 men, but now they want me back again. But I ain't a-marching anymore. It's always the old to lead us to the war, always the young to fall. And look at all we've won with a saber and a gun. Tell me, was it worth it all? And I flew the final mission in the Japanese skies. I set off the mighty mushroom roar. When I saw the cities burning, I knew that I was learning that I ain't a-marching anymore. Now the labor leaders screaming when they close the missile plants. United Fruit screams at the Cuban shore. Call it peace or call it treason, call it love or call it reason, but I ain't a-marching anymore. No, I ain't a-marching anymore.
Wow, that song really, if you say 1964, really is years before major protest against the Vietnam War that was happening.
Well, I think
then.
it's right around the beginning of it, maybe.
Yeah, fantastic. Anyhow, I would like to get into another Phil Oakes tune, but I want to ask someone else to sing it, much as I love how you do that, David. The song actually is connected to our Torah service, okay? So you're probably familiar with Lecha Adonai HaGedula v'HaGevura v'HaTiferet v'HaNetzach v'HaHod. Well, Phil Oakes borrowed that idea, and we'll talk about it after we hear my good friend Cindy Paley sing Power and the Glory.
Hello, Phil.
Hi, Cindy.
So great to be here.
Thank you
Phil
for
Oakes.
joining us.
Yeah. Well, Phil Oakes was a great patriot. He loved America, but he also spoke out against that which was wrong. And as I was reading about him yesterday, I found this fourth verse that he wrote in 1963 when the song came out, and it was never recorded. The words are, "But our land is still troubled by men who have to hate. They twist away our freedom and they twist away our fate. Fear is their weapon and treason is their cry, but we can stop them if we try. Come on and take a walk with me through this green and growing land. Walk through the meadows and the mountains and the sand. Walk through the valleys and the rivers and the plains. Walk through the sun and walk through the rain. Here is a land full of power and glory, beauty that words cannot recall. Our power shall rest on the strength of her freedom. Her glory shall rest on us all. From Colorado, Kansas, and the Carolinas to Virginia and Alaska, from the old to the new, Texas and Ohio and the California shore. Tell me who can ask for more? Here is a land full of power and glory, beauty that words cannot recall. Oh, her power shall rest on the strength of her freedom. Her glory shall rest on us all. Yet she's only as rich as the poorest of the poor, only as free as a padlocked prison door, only as strong as our love for this land, only as tall as we stand. Here is a land full of power and glory, beauty that words cannot recall. Oh, her power shall rest on the strength of her freedom. Her glory shall rest on us all. But our land is still troubled by men who have to hate. They twist away our freedom and they twist away our fate. Fear is their weapon and treason is their cry. We can stop them if we try. Here is a land full of power and glory, beauty that words cannot recall. Oh, her power shall rest on the strength of her freedom. Her glory shall rest on us all. Come on and take a walk with me through this green and growing land. Walk through the meadows and the mountains and the sand. Walk through the valleys and the rivers and the plains. Walk through the sun and walk through the rain. Here is a land full of power and glory, beauty that words cannot recall. Her power shall rest on the strength of her freedom. Her glory shall rest on us all, on us all.
Thank you for that, Cindy. You know, people wouldn't think of that as a Jewish song per se, although Phil Oakes was Jewish, as we pointed out earlier. But you have Lecha Adonai Hagedula v'Hagevura v'Hatiferet, right? Mm-hmm. So the power and the glory are God's. Here he's taking that idea of power and glory, probably went to Hebrew school and learned that, and now turned it into a song of protest. Amazing, amazing thing. And thanks for sharing that new verse with us.
Yeah, never heard it before. But the point of the song was we have responsibilities to each other, and the only way to make America great is to build each other up and to help our communities. Tikkun olam.
Yeah,
make the world a better
so true. So Cindy, you know, you're so well known all over the country and parts of the world as well as a purveyor of Jewish music, Israeli songs. I learned many of the songs that I do today from listening to your recordings. Also Yiddish songs, which you're now become quite expert at and speak Yiddish. We don't think of you as a folk singer really, but you are that as well. So can you tell our audience a little bit about you and that world of folk music?
Well, the world of folk music is the world I grew up in, with Yiddish, and not in my house, but all our friends were Yiddishists. And I went to a Kinderschule and grew up at the Valley Cities Jewish Community Center, where we sang folk music. And I went to Camp JCA, and this was our, you know, a lot of cultural songs, international songs, the songs of the Weavers and Pete Seeger, and all the protest music of the 60s was what I grew up with.
So, but now
And-
you're doing it professionally with a group.
Right, because I started, I always did folk music with the children a little bit, especially around President's Day. I did some patriotic songs, but I brought in folk, down by the riverside and around Martin Luther King. We always brought in, I had a book of folk songs for the children. And it was never something, I always wanted to pass it down and do down by the riverside and, we shall overcome. And there were many others. We had a lot of songs. But when Pete Seeger died 6 years ago, in January 2014 is when I said, I'm going to do a little program. And we actually wrote this program about the Weavers and Pete, and with a little history in it and using their music. And I first did it at our big reunion we had that year for our family camp from the center, what had been going on since the 50s. And then I took that, that program and did it for my Levi Shah group at their retreat. And next thing I knew, we were going to a synagogue, Temple Akiba, and I was doing a program of Pete Seeger that had a lot of old folkies there, and I invited friends to join. And that's when I came back into contact. I'd always been friends. Mike Sirota was someone I knew from the 1960s in Valley City's Jewish Community Center. He was staff.
Great guy and a great musician. Yeah.
And that's where I met him first. And he also went to Camp JCA, and so Mike brought along Ed, and Mike and Ed were part of a group called the Folk Collection. So I invited them, and we had a little rehearsal. We would got together a little program about the Weavers and Pete Seeger. And from then, 5 years ago, they said, well, we have our Folk Collection group, but we want you to sing with us. So kind of like Peter, Paul, and Mary, and they invited me, and we became the Folk Experience. And that's
Great.
when we came to VBS 5 years ago was our first time.
Right. And we've had 3 concerts, I think, or is it 4 now?
We had 4.
Oh, it might be 4.
This would have been our 5th, yeah.
Yes, well, this counts as the 5th one.
And
and what we're going to do, sorry, go ahead, Cindy.
No, we just, we always bring lyric booklets because it's not a concert, it's a sing-along. We want everyone to just sing out and just have fun.
It's such a great experience. And so before this whole lockdown happened, you did a concert, and I'm not sure where this concert takes place, but we have some footage from that. It shows actual people mingling and being together. It's amazing.
They're at an ice rink in Santa Monica because there were 10 weeks, 10 Sundays that CARS, Community Arts Resources Center, my brother is in charge of CARS, and he booked us, and he never books me, but he said, you could do a family program, right? And this was, ice skating outdoors in Santa Monica. And I said, yeah, let's do the Folk Experience. We can do songs for all the children. And so that's what it was. That's why people are up and down. They're getting their skates on. And we're right next to the rink. And there were 10 weeks of artists, 2 groups every Sunday.
So this in itself is a much longer concert, but we're going to just pick one thing from it, and it's a Bob Dylan song, The Times They Are Changin'. Tell me a little bit about that song, and then we'll hear the Folk Experience do it.
Well, in late 1960, a 19-year-old college dropout named Bob Zimmerman, he left his home state of Minnesota and set out for the East Coast. And then in less than a decade, Bob Zimmerman would go from a kid with a guitar and a passion for the blues to a towering songwriter and performer who would influence entire generations of listeners and recording artists. And he was known as Bob Dylan. We know him as Bob Dylan, and 50 years later, this song, Times They're Changing, is still as relevant today as it was at the time of the Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement, and the Vietnam War of the 60s.
Thanks, Cindy. Well, let's hear the Folk Experience do their version of The Times They Are A-Changin', and they still are.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it as soon wrenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changin'. Come writers and critics who cross eyes with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. But don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin, and there's no telling who that it's naming. For the loser now may later to win, for the times they are a-changin'. From senators, congressmen, please ease the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall, for he who gets one will be he who has stalled. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are a-changin'.
Come mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand, for the times they are a-changin'.
The line it is drawn, the curse it is cast. The slow and now will later be fast, and the present now will later be past. The order is rapidly fading, and the first one now will later be last, for the times they are a-changin'. For the times they are a-changin'. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and welcome back, David. You mentioned the song to me, and I knew the song, but I didn't really know the songwriter, Malvina Reynolds. So tell us about her and the song.
She was actually one of the very first protest songwriters. People don't know her name much, but you've heard her songs. You've heard Little Boxes on the Hillside, little boxes all made out of ticky-tacky.
Yeah, great song.
All look just the same.
Yeah, kind of a protest against Levittown and some of those developments, those early housing developments.
Right. Yeah, sort of a protest against conformity and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
She was born in 1900 and didn't start writing songs till she was in her 40s, although she played in a violin in a dance band in the 20s. But she wasn't really a professional musician. She met Pete Seeger and some other folk singers in maybe the early 50s. Went back to school in her 50s, which was the 50s, at Berkeley, studied music, and came out a songwriter. And then she wrote a bunch of songs that lots and lots of people recorded, Joan Baez and Pete Seeger and everybody. And in fact, this one that I'm going to do was done by a couple of British invasion groups, the Searchers and the Seekers. They were both looking for something, I guess.
If I'm right, you're going to do What Have They Done to the Rain?
Right.
And I've got a quote, actually. Joan Baez said, "It's the gentlest protest song I know."
Yeah, well, that was sort of the signature of all of her songs. She wrote a lot of children's songs, too. There's a couple of albums of her doing children's songs. And these all sound like they could be, despite some of the messages. And this one is about nuclear fallout, basically. just a little rain falling all around. The grass lifts its head to the heavenly sound. Just a little rain, just a little rain. What have they done to the rain? Just a little boy standing in the rain, the gentle rain that falls for years, and the grass is gone, the boy disappears, and the rain keeps falling like helpless tears. And what have they done to the rain? Just a little breeze out of the sky. The leaves nod their heads as the breeze blows by. Just a little breeze with some smoke in its eye. What have they done to the rain? Just a little boy standing in the rain, the gentle rain that falls for years, and the grass is gone, the boy disappears, and the rain keeps falling like helpless tears. And what have they done to the rain? What have they done to the rain?
Oh, so moving. David, thank you for your interpretation of that tune. I've heard it before, but I love the way you do it.
Thanks.
So thanks to you and to all of our guests, to Cindy Paley, to the Folk Experience, to Cantor Herschel Fox, and everyone who's joined us today to talk about protest songs, the Jewish voice.
The answer is blowing